Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen and enjoy my stories every day. The sound of the shower running was my cue. Marcia's phone lay on the dresser, unattended. For months, I had told myself I was imagining things. Her late nights, the excuses about work deadlines, the way she'd pull away when I reached for her, it had to be the stress of our lives, the weight of parenthood, the demands of jobs. But deep down, the knot in my stomach told me something darker lurked beneath the surface. I hadn't planned to look at her phone that night. I hated the idea of snooping. It felt dirty, invasive, like I was the one betraying her trust. But curiosity gnawed at me, relentless and insistent. I told myself it was for my sanity, a way to prove my suspicions were baseless. I reached for her phone, hands trembling as if it might burn me. The screen lit up before I could touch it. A message appeared, its glowing words searing themselves into my brain, "Can't wait to taste you again tomorrow, baby." I stared at the words, my breath caught in my throat. The world tilted, the foundation of my marriage crumbling in an instant. My hand shook as I set the phone down, heart pounding like a war drum. The shower stopped, and I scrambled back to my spot on the bed, pretending to scroll through my own phone. My chest felt heavy, a weight of betrayal crushing me. Marcia emerged moments later, her hair wrapped in a towel, her face glowing from the heat of the water. She smiled, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "Hey, babe," she said casually, pulling on her pajamas. "You okay?" I nodded, forcing a tight smile. "Yeah, just tired." She climbed into bed beside me, the same bed we had shared for 12 years. As she drifted off to sleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced, replaying every moment of the past few months. Her laughter during late-night phone calls, the way she'd rush to her car after work, the perfume she'd started wearing, things I'd brushed off as harmless. Now, they painted a picture I couldn't unsee. The next morning, I confronted her. I wasn't prepared for how quickly she denied it, how effortlessly she lied. "That message? It's nothing," she said, brushing me off. "Just a joke between coworkers." I wasn't buying it. A joke? "Marcia, that's not something you joke about." "Who is he?" Her defenses crumbled slowly, piece by piece. At first, it was just a flirty coworker. Then it was someone she had confided in about her unhappiness. Finally, after weeks of half-truths and avoidance, she admitted the full extent of her affair. His name was Nathan, a colleague from her office. They had been sneaking around for months, meeting in hotels during work trips and stealing moments together after hours. She blamed me for it all. "You're always working," she said. "You're distant. You don't make me feel seen anymore." Her words cut deep, but the pain quickly turned to anger. "So, your solution is to cheat? To destroy our family? What about our kids, Marcia? What about them?" She had no answer, only tears. For a while, I tried to fix things. I thought we owed it to our children to try. Counseling sessions, date nights, promises to rebuild trust, it all felt hollow. Every time she left the house, I wondered if she was meeting him. Every glance at her phone was a reminder of her betrayal. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. After 6 months of torment, I couldn't take it anymore. I filed for divorce. The process was brutal, drawn out by Marcia's refusal to cooperate. She fought me on custody, on assets, on everything she could think of. Meanwhile, she flaunted her affair, posting pictures of her and Nathan on social media, smiling and carefree. Seeing him with my children, calling himself their bonus dad, was a knife to my heart. But I endured. I fought for my kids, for the life I had built without her. When the divorce was finalized, I was granted primary custody and the house. Marcia moved in with Nathan, and for the first time in a year, I felt a glimmer of peace. Life after the divorce was quiet but steady. I poured myself into my work and my children, finding solace in routine. Weekends were spent at the park or helping with school projects. Evenings were filled with laughter at the dinner table. Slowly, I began to rebuild, piece by piece. Marcia faded into the background. She had visitation rights, but the kids didn't seem eager to spend time with her. They saw through her facade, understanding in their own way that she had chosen someone else over their family. I thought I had put it all behind me, the betrayal, the anger, the pain. Then, one night, the phone rang. It was nearly midnight, and the kids were asleep. I considered ignoring it, but something told me to answer. Her voice, broken and sobbing, came through the line. "Please," she begged. "I have nowhere else to go." Nathan had left her. He had drained their bank account, lost his job, and vanished. She was broke, jobless, and on the verge of eviction. I felt a flicker of satisfaction at her misery, a sense of justice for the pain she had caused. But it was quickly overshadowed by guilt. After all, we had shared over a decade of our lives. She was the mother of my children. "Please," she whispered again, her voice barely audible. "Just for a little while. Let me stay in the guest room." I hesitated, the weight of her request pressing down on me. The part of me that had loved her wanted to help. But the scars of her betrayal were still fresh. I took a deep breath, my decision clear. "Marcia," I said, my voice steady, "you made your choices. And I made mine. I can't help you." I hung up, my heart heavy but resolute. This was my second chance, not for us, but for me. For the first time in years, I felt free. And that was enough. The days following Marcia's call were a strange blend of relief and unease. On one hand, I felt liberated, a sense of control over a life that had been spiraling for years. On the other, there was a gnawing guilt, a whisper that perhaps I had been too harsh. After all, she was the mother of my children. I tried to shake it off, reminding myself of the nights I'd lain awake, haunted by her betrayal, and the pain of watching her flaunt her affair while I fought to keep our family intact. But life didn't slow down. With 2 kids depending on me, I had no choice but to keep moving. Mornings were chaotic as usual, packing lunches, helping Emma find her soccer cleats, reminding Daniel to finish his science project. My workdays were consumed by endless meetings and troubleshooting IT issues. Evenings were for homework, dinners, and bedtime stories. The routine was a comfort, a way to anchor myself amidst the storm of emotions Marcia's call had stirred up. One evening, about a week later, Daniel came to me with a question that stopped me cold. "Dad," he said hesitantly, "do you think Mom's okay?" I paused, caught off guard. Daniel was only 11, but his eyes carried a seriousness that belied his age. Emma, sitting at the kitchen table working on algebra, looked up, curious. I could feel their unspoken questions hanging in the air. "I'm sure she'll be fine," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "She's a grown-up. She'll figure things out." Daniel nodded, but his brow remained furrowed. "It's just, she seemed really sad when we talked last weekend." I bit back a sigh. I wanted to tell them everything, to lay bare the truth of what their mother had done. But they were just kids. They didn't need the weight of our history pressing down on them. "Sometimes grown-ups go through tough times," I said carefully. "But it's not your job to worry about that. Just focus on being kids, okay?" Emma rolled her eyes. "He's just asking, Dad. You don't have to give the 'it's not your job' speech." I chuckled despite myself. "All right, Miss Smarty Pants. Back to algebra." Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of birthday parties, vacations, lazy Sundays on the couch. Marcia's smile beamed in so many of them, her arm draped around me, her eyes crinkling with laughter. Looking at those moments, it was hard to reconcile the woman I had loved with the one who had called me, broken and desperate. I was deep in thought when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. "Thomas, please. Just hear me out. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. For the kid's sake, at least." Her number might have changed, but her pleas hadn't. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Finally, I set the phone down without responding. The next morning, as I was dropping the kids off at school, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, older than my 38 years. The sleepless nights, the stress of single parenthood, the lingering wounds from the divorce, it all showed in the lines around my eyes, the gray streaks creeping into my hair. "Dad?" Emma's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" She shrugged. "You just look. I don't know. Like something's bothering you." I parked the car and turned to face her. "Emma, I'm fine. Really. But thanks for checking on me." She gave me a skeptical look but didn't push further. As she and Daniel climbed out of the car, I watched them join the stream of students heading into the building. They were my anchors, my reason to keep pushing forward. That afternoon, as I sat at my desk sifting through reports, a knock at the door startled me. It was Sam, a friend and coworker who had been my sounding board through the worst of the divorce. He leaned against the doorframe, his brow furrowed. "You've been quieter than usual," he said. "What's going on?" I hesitated. Sam knew most of the story, but I hadn't mentioned Marcia's recent call or her text. Still, if anyone would understand, it was him. "She called," I admitted. "Last week. Then texted me last night. She's broke, getting evicted, begging to stay in the guest room." Sam whistled low. "And what did you say?" I told her no. "And I didn't respond to the text." He nodded slowly. "That's probably for the best. Letting her back into your life, even a little, could open up a whole new can of worms." "I know," I said, running a hand through my hair. "But it's harder than I thought. I keep thinking about the kids. About how this might affect them." Sam pulled up a chair and sat across from me. "Look, man, you've done everything you can for those kids. You've been there when she wasn't. Don't let her guilt trip you into thinking you owe her anything." I sighed, grateful for his words but still uneasy. "Yeah, you're right. It's just, complicated. Complicated or not, you've got to look out for yourself, too. Don't let her drag you back into the mess she made." That evening, as I tucked Daniel into bed, he looked up at me with wide, earnest eyes. "Dad, if Mom needs help, can't we give it to her? Just a little?" His question hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to tell him that sometimes helping someone means letting them face the consequences of their actions. But how could I explain that to an 11-year-old? "I don't know, buddy," I said softly. "Sometimes, grown-ups have to figure things out on their own. It's not always easy, but it's important." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I just don't want her to be sad." I kissed his forehead and turned off the light. "I know, buddy. I know." As I closed his door, I leaned against the wall, the weight of his words pressing down on me. No matter how much I wanted to leave Marcia in the past, her shadow still loomed over our lives. And I wasn't sure how to escape it. The text from Marcia lingered in the back of my mind, an unshakable echo of her desperation. I had thought ignoring her would bring closure, but it didn't. Instead, it festered, feeding into my doubt. Was I being too harsh? Too cold? Every day, I replayed our history in my head, weighing my decision over and over again. It wasn't until Daniel brought it up again during breakfast that I realized I couldn't avoid it much longer. "Did Mom call you?" he asked casually, his spoon hovering over a bowl of cereal. Emma glanced up from her phone, her expression cautious. "Why do you ask?" I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "She said she might talk to you," Daniel said, focusing intently on his cereal. "She told me she's having a hard time." Emma set her phone down, her tone sharp. "She told me the same thing. Said she wanted to stay here. You didn't say yes, did you?" I shook my head. "No, I didn't. But it's not that simple." Emma crossed her arms. "It is. She made her choices. Now she has to deal with them." Daniel frowned. "But she's still our mom. And that doesn't mean Dad has to save her every time she screws up." Their bickering left me feeling torn. Emma's words echoed my own thoughts, but Daniel's innocence tugged at my heart. I hated that they were caught in the middle of something they didn't deserve. That afternoon, I found myself parked outside Marcia's apartment complex. I hadn't planned on coming. I hadn't even told her I was coming. But the nagging guilt had won out, and I wanted to see for myself how bad things really were. The complex was run down, the kind of place where the paint peeled off the walls and broken blinds hung askew in the windows. I hesitated, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Was this really the right move? Did I owe her anything more than what I'd already given? As I debated with myself, the door to one of the units opened, and Marcia stepped out. She looked thinner, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her face pale and tired. I hadn't seen her in months, and the difference was striking. She spotted me and froze, her eyes widening in surprise. "Thomas," she said as she approached the car. "What are you doing here?" I rolled down the window. "I wanted to see how you were doing." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. "I'm not doing great, obviously." I gestured for her to get in the car. She hesitated but finally slid into the passenger seat. Up close, she looked even more fragile. "I didn't respond to your text," I said. "But I've been thinking about it." Her lips trembled. I didn't know who else to turn to. Nathan left me with nothing. I'm about to lose this place. I know I've made mistakes, Thomas. Huge mistakes. But I'm begging you, for the kid's sake, please let me stay in the guest room. Just until I can get back on my feet. Her words hit like a sledgehammer, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Marcia, you put me through hell. You lied, cheated, and dragged me through a divorce. You flaunted him, made it impossible for me to move on. And now you want my help." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know I don't deserve it. But I'm desperate." I sighed, leaning back against the seat. The kids are still my priority. I don't want them to think I'm the bad guy for saying no. But this can't be a free pass, Marcia. If I let you stay, there will be rules. Strict ones. She nodded frantically. "Anything. I'll do anything." Later that evening, I sat Emma and Daniel down in the living room. Marcia's bags were already in the guest room, and she was unpacking quietly upstairs. I dreaded this conversation more than anything. "I need to talk to you both about something," I began. "Your mom is going to be staying here for a little while." Emma shot to her feet. "What? Why?" "Because she's in a tough spot right now," I said firmly. "This isn't permanent. It's just until she can get back on her feet." Emma crossed her arms, her face red with anger. "This is a terrible idea. She's just going to drag us all down again." "Emma," I said, keeping my voice calm, "this isn't about me. It's about making sure you and Daniel don't feel like you're losing your mom entirely." "She lost us when she left," Emma snapped, storming off to her room. Daniel, quieter and more thoughtful, stayed seated. "Thanks, Dad," he said softly. "For giving her a chance." The next few days were tense. Marcia mostly stayed out of sight, retreating to the guest room or going out to look for jobs. I gave her a week to find something, and she promised she would. Emma avoided her like the plague, refusing to even say hello. Daniel, on the other hand, was cautiously optimistic, engaging her in short conversations and trying to bridge the gap. One evening, as I worked on a project in the den, Marcia knocked softly on the door. "Can we talk?" she asked, stepping inside. I sighed, setting my laptop aside. "What is it?" I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "For giving me this chance. I know I've hurt you in ways I can never undo. But I'm trying, Thomas. I really am." I looked at her, searching for sincerity in her eyes. "Marcia, this isn't about us. This is about making sure the kids feel secure. That's all." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. And I'll prove to you that I can do better." I wanted to believe her. For Daniel's sake. For Emma's. But a part of me still braced for the worst. People don't change overnight, and trust isn't something you can rebuild with words alone. As Marcia left the room, I stared at the empty doorway, the weight of her presence hanging heavy in the air. Letting her stay was a gamble, one I wasn't sure I'd win. But for now, it was a risk I was willing to take, for the kids, if not for her. The tension in the house lingered, like an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. Marcia had been living in the guest room for almost 2 months, and while she'd kept to her word about looking for work and contributing to household chores, the strain was undeniable. Emma barely spoke to her, their interactions curt and tinged with resentment. Daniel, ever the optimist, tried to act as a buffer, but even his patience wore thin. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Emma stormed into the kitchen, her face red with anger. "Dad, I can't do this anymore," she said, slamming her phone onto the counter. I turned from the stove, startled by her outburst. "What's going on?" She gestured toward her phone. "She's still talking to him. Nathan. I saw her texting him." The room seemed to spin. "Are you sure?" Emma's glare was cold. "I know what I saw." My heart sank. After everything, after the promises and the tears, she was still tangled up in the same web. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Go to your room, Emma. I'll handle this." She hesitated, her jaw clenched, before storming off. I picked up her phone, scrolling through the screenshots she had captured. There it was, Marcia's messages to Nathan, begging him to come back, telling him she still loved him. I felt a wave of anger rise in my chest, hot and unrelenting. I waited until after dinner to confront her. Daniel had gone to bed, and Emma was holed up in her room, headphones on. Marcia was in the guest room, her door slightly ajar. I knocked once before pushing it open. "We need to talk," I said, holding up the phone. Her face went pale as she saw the screen. "Thomas, I can explain." "Explain?" I said, my voice rising. "Explain how you've been lying to me. To the kids. Again." She stood, wringing her hands. "It's not what it looks like." I stepped closer, the betrayal cutting deep. "Then what is it?" "Because it looks like you're still in contact with the man who destroyed our family." Tears filled her eyes, but I wasn't moved. "Thomas, I was lonely. He reached out, and I." "You what?" I snapped. "Decided to throw away the second chance I gave you." Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. "This was for the kids, Marcia. Not for you. I let you back into this house because I wanted them to have their mother. And you repay me by dragging them through this mess all over again." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." "Sorry isn't good enough," I said, my voice breaking. "You need to leave." The next morning, Marcia was gone. She left a note on the kitchen table, apologizing again and promising to stay out of our lives until she could prove she had changed. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness as I read her words. Part of me wanted to believe she could change, but a larger part knew better. Emma was quiet at breakfast, her gaze fixed on her cereal. Daniel looked around, confused. "Where's Mom?" "She had to leave," I said, keeping my tone even. "She'll call you soon." His face fell, but he didn't argue. Emma gave me a small nod, her way of saying thank you. Life returned to a fragile normalcy over the next few weeks. The house felt lighter without Marcia's presence, though the kids still carried the weight of her absence. I tried to be there for them as much as I could, but the cracks in our family were hard to ignore. One rainy evening, about a month after Marcia left, the phone rang. I was in the den, sorting through bills, and almost didn't answer. When I saw the number, unfamiliar but local, a sense of unease crept over me. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Mr. Thomas?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Officer Green with the Charlotte Police Department." My heart sank. "Yes. I'm sorry to inform you, but your ex-wife, Marcia, was found this evening. She was in a car accident." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Is she?" "She didn't survive," the officer said gently. "I'm so sorry." I sank into the chair, the room spinning. She explained the details. Marcia had been driving in the rain, lost control, and hit a tree. It was instant. No pain. The words blurred together as I struggled to process them. Telling the kids was the hardest thing I've ever done. Daniel broke down, sobbing into my chest, while Emma sat in stunned silence. Her anger toward her mother melted away in an instant, replaced by a grief that consumed her. The days that followed were a blur of funeral arrangements and condolences. Friends and family came and went, offering kind words and casseroles. But nothing could fill the void Marcia left behind. One night, as I sat alone in the living room, Emma joined me. She looked older somehow, her face etched with sadness. "Dad," she said softly, "do you think she knew we loved her? Even after everything?" I pulled her close, my own tears spilling over. "I think she did. And I think she loved us, too, in the best way she could." We sat there for a long time, the silence heavy but comforting. Marcia was gone, but her impact, both good and bad, would stay with us forever. And as much as I hated to admit it, I missed her. Not the woman she became, but the one she had been. The one I fell in love with. Sometimes, second chances don't end the way you hope. Sometimes, all you can do is pick up the pieces and move forward. For the kids. For yourself. For the future.